Ça y est, on aperçoit Tower of London. Tower Bridge va s'ouvrir dans 36 minutes. On va passer pour venir s'amarrer sur Tower Bridge Quay. On va rester 5 jours.
Alors après c'est arrivé en toute simplicité, direction la City pour parler capture carbone version money. Vous avez peut-être déjà vu ce genre de logo ou entendu ce genre de phrase.
Because Apple is going carbon neutral.
Microsoft will be carbon negative.
Delta Airlines will become fully carbon neutral.
Bon alors qu'on soit bien clair, ça ne veut pas dire que votre vol, que votre bouteille plastique ou que votre clic n'émet pas de CO2, mais que le CO2 émis est en fait compensé. Et oui, parce que l'on appelle des crédits carbone. Bon, nous on a profité de notre escale à Londres pour aller enquêter sur la question. Notre enquête commence avec un broker de carbone, aka un courtier en crédit carbone.
Hi, nice to meet you.
How's things? Morning, everyone. How are we doing? This is our office. This is where it all happens.
Je m'attendais à une salle de marché survoltée. C'est légèrement plus chill.
Luc est le boss de Nature Broking, une agence chargée de dénicher des tonnes de CO2 au meilleur prix pour ses clients.
First and foremost, from me, big shout out to Vera. We managed to get a big client proposal out yesterday, and it's been a awesome amount of work, so well done.
Luc a plaqué les assurances pour créer Nature Broking avec son associé il y a 3 ans.
Why have you chosen the carbon credit sector?
We think it's the most effective way of driving capital into nature's restoration and climate change mitigation. It's the largest market. There's no net zero without carbon credits or carbon removal credits. We've regenerated about 20,000 hectares of land. We've planted a forest, the equivalent of maybe 100 hectares of trees. So in terms of tons removed, somewhere between about 60 and 70,000 tons.
Alors ça ne veut pas dire que Luc et son équipe plantent eux-mêmes les arbres ou restaurent les champs, mais le marché des crédits carbone permet de financer des projets qui le font. Un crédit carbone, c'est 1 tonne de CO2 évitée ou retirée de l'atmosphère grâce à un projet. Du genre ce qu'on a vu avec les forêts en France ou avec Pronoé aux Canaries. Et donc, une organisation peut payer entre 3 et 5 $ en moyenne un crédit carbone, donc 1 tonne de CO2, pour compenser ses propres émissions et financer le projet. Aujourd'hui, ce marché mondial pèse environ 1 milliard $. Direction le sud de Londres, dans une ferme pédagogique. Luc a amené quelques-uns de ses clients et partenaires.
What we're trying to do is get as much CO2 from up there as we can down here, because up there we can't see it. I really still can't get my head around this. It's a scientist thing. Is how does that turn into something black and lovely in the soil?
Au Royaume-Uni, Doug Vinstal, c'est un pionnier des crédits carbone, super reconnu dans sa catégorie.
But when we're talking about regenerative agriculture, try not to disturb the soil. When you plough a field, you'll lose 8 tons equivalent of CO2 in the first 20 minutes of ploughing a field. It's crazy.
It's not a very usual Tuesday for a broker from London, right?
No, it's not at all. It's one of my favourite sort of things to do because it's such an amazing place. I just like spending time outside and actually working in a job where you can go and do that, and we can take clients to be able to see this and engage the world a little bit more in the work that we do is fantastic. It's so much fun.
What we're after is a beautiful, chocolatey, almost want to eat it. You know, it smells really good. There you go, pass it around. See that? That worm is doing so much. They're aerating the soil. They're moving this carbon from the top down through the soil profile.
Blé, colza, œufs, élevage bovin, en plus d'activités classiques, Doug teste plein de choses pour capter toujours plus de CO2.
The trees that we've planted are cricketback willows. What we're trying to do here is develop this food forest concept. That's why we have almonds here. That's why I have sugar maples over there.
How is your day?
That's been very nice, thank you. It's my second one of these visits, so yeah, always good to come to a farm and kind of see how it operates and learn all about how they're going to generate the kind of carbon offsets. Yeah, it's a really good project.
Doug is amazing. He's just trying everything. It's different types of farming, regenerative farming, the research that's going in, using everything, all the waste is going back into a circular process. It's just quite incredible.
Les ports locaux, des entreprises d'assurance ou vestimentaires, Doug choisit toujours soigneusement à qui il vend son carbone.
How many carbon credits have you sold until then? Do you have an idea?
Each carbon credit is 1 tonne of CO2, so 2,500 to 3,000 tonnes of CO2 removed from the atmosphere, put into the soil or into trees or something like that.
Did you start regenerative agriculture for that?
I was always interested, but I think it was the ability to be able to sell carbon credits that gave me the confidence to make that transition. What someone buys is a carbon credit. What they get is more nature, more biodiversity, more natural flood management, healthier food. And that's quite fulfilling as a grower.
Après 2 heures à crapahuter dans les champs, it's tea time autour d'un jeu.
When we started nature broking, one of the biggest problems was that we were trying to talk to people who didn't really understand the carbon markets. So we thought we'd put together a game where you all get involved.
The idea behind this part of this is that these are some of the carbon solutions that are out there, and they're a bit funky. Some of them are really cool, some of them are quite interesting, but what we'll do is read them out and it's a matching game.
En gros, c'est question pour un champion, version anglaise et méthode de capture carbone.
Is the use of chemical or physical processes to extract CO2 directly from the atmosphere. Direct air capture? Direct air capture, correct. Renewable energy, yeah. No. I think that's probably woodland creation.
And more places for wildlife to thrive.
This one?
No. What do we think? Consensus? Agreed.
Il n'y a que des nerfs de la capture carbone. Is it important nowadays for a company to go for it?
The honest answer is yes and no. Reduction is the most important thing. So every organisation should be drastically reducing their emissions. But as they are reducing their emissions and they want to mitigate their impact, buying credits is a really good way of doing that. And it facilitates so many amazing things, from financing, potentially future carbon removal technologies, all the way down to, helping to finance mangrove restoration, regenerative agriculture, etc. However, as we've seen here, some of the most amazing co-benefits that we have, cook stoves, Red Plus, protecting rainforest, etc., they are then becoming less popular as an offset. With 2023, with the Guardian articles, which is Coca-Cola, Pepsi, BMW, they all got exposed to this project Kariba, which caused them to have significant accusations of greenwashing.
Évidemment, on a voulu en savoir plus. En 2023, une enquête du Guardian révèle qu'une énorme quantité de crédits carbone de la forêt amazonienne a été largement surévaluée, sans avoir aucun impact sur la planète. Derrière ce scandale, les méthodes de calcul de Verra, un des organismes chargés de vérifier l'impact des crédits carbone avant et après leur vente. Disney, Shell, Gucci et d'autres sont accusés de greenwashing. Et la valeur du marché dégringole de 2 milliards à 1 milliard de dollars environ. Aujourd'hui, les crédits carbone n'ont toujours pas bonne presse. La faute à des scandales à répétition et la difficulté de mesurer leur impact concret. À la London School of Economics, Frank Venmans réfléchit à comment améliorer ça.
Bonjour.
Salut.
What are the main pillars for a good carbon credit?
It's easier sometimes to define what is a bad offset.
Okay.
There are 3 issues with offsets one should care about is permanence or not. Because the emission will give you a warming effect that is relatively constant for 100,000 years. And so your removal should have a cooling effect that has also this permanent effect. A second problem is additionality. What is happening if the project was absent? If you want to sell a credit from protecting a forest, you claim that without your protection, the forest is gone. That might well be true, but if that is not true, you're overselling. And a third point is market effects. An example would be reforesting a forest in Indonesia. It was maybe palm oil, and you turn it back to a forest. Is the palm oil going to be driven to another forest? In that case, it displaces deforestation. And these feedbacks are quite complicated to measure also.
What strikes me is it's very complicated to make all the measurements. So why do we sell carbon credits? Why don't we stop it and just finance green projects?
In the perfect world, there are better things you can do. But in the imperfect world, offset markets make a positive difference. They do reduce emissions. You can also think of them as temporary and maybe in the future we do something better.
En attendant, le marché des crédits carbone pourrait être multiplié par 20 d'ici 2030. Pour rassurer les investisseurs, des agences de notation privées émergent, sorte de caution anti-greenwashing.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to BeZero, I'm Matthew. It's my job to assess the quality of carbon credits, whether 1 tonne of carbon credit is actually equal to 1 tonne of CO2 avoided or removed by individual projects. And then we here have everyone who's involved with actually rating the carbon projects themselves. Around 75% of us have PhDs in the fields which we work in.
Industriel, technologique, naturel, BeZero évalue toutes sortes de projets partout dans le monde.
This is going to visit an agricultural project in India.
All right.
This is one of our Brazilian scientists, Dr. Camila Silva, out in the Amazon.
En plus du travail de terrain, les équipes passent au peigne fin le projet, le marché, les politiques locales, la situation géopolitique et les risques environnementaux.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. This is a good carbon project in Canada, but is in quite a fire-prone area of Canada and British Columbia. So massive fire here that wipes out a lot of the standing carbon stocks in the project area.
Et au bout d'un gros mois de travail,
And this is the fruit of our labours, the BeZero platform, assessing each project on an 8-point scale, from AAA, which is very good, highly likely to achieve its target, achieve what it said it's doing, to D, which we think has the lowest likelihood of doing that. And we've done almost 700 of those to date.
Alors Matthew ne décide pas seul de la note. Il présente ses recommandations à un comité de notation réuni plusieurs fois par semaine. Bon, on n'a pas eu le droit de filmer, mais il a bien voulu nous faire une petite simulation.
This outline in white is the project area. This is where the avoidance activities are going to be targeted. We look back to 2018, fast forward to the first quarter of 2026, and all of this land has been now turned into plantation. So the protection of this project through carbon finance has been pretty effective at preserving an intact peatland ecosystem. That suggests an A for additionality.
Chaque note est actée à l'unanimité, car l'enjeu est important.
For a similar peatland project, also in Indonesia, we actually upgraded the rating from single A to double A. Project's credit price jumped significantly by around $1, I think, which is a lot when you're considering that these projects are issuing millions of credits. So if you go from triple B to A, or from A to double A, each one of those jumps can be linked to a 40% price increase. It is a lot of responsibility.
So what are the lines not to cross?
Essentially, our commercial function and the ratings function is separated completely. Ratings are paid for upfront prior to delivery to ensure that there's no payment for performance. We don't do consulting. We don't provide data on project specifics that could be used in project design. It is just important to have that distinction there.
À la ferme, Luc et Doug défendent un marché plus accessible et transparent.
So how was the day? Do you think some people are going to convinced by carbon credits?
I hope so. I think so. I think it's been great. There's some really interesting people there as well. I think there was everyone from kind of people who work within the sector to people who are looking to buy credits.
To come and touch, feel, smell, all these people today have really engaged. That's really important. There's been too many projects where it's happening in Brazil, or is it happening in Brazil? No one really knows. Here, you can see it in action. So whereas these companies need to be focused on emissions reductions, we as farmers and the land sector are focused on emissions reductions, but we're also able to remove it as well.
There's no net zero without the net, and the net is carbon credits. So we have to build a market that can cater for that.
Aujourd'hui, pour espérer contenir le réchauffement climatique, la communauté scientifique recommande aux entreprises de d'abord réduire de 90% leurs émissions avant de se tourner vers les crédits carbone.